Okay, y'all, welcome to today's video. We're going to be talking about that accord, leather, leather. Every time I say leather and I say it like that, I think of Eartha Kitt, leather. So I filmed a leather fragrance video about this same time last year. It was about January-ish, something like that, of 2022. It really wasn't a very popular video. And I think that is in large part due to the fact most of my audience is women from the ages of about 35 to 65-ish, that range. And I think that a lot of ladies are just intimidated by leather. They think of it as something that only men can wear. And I beg to differ. I think there are a lot of leather fragrances or fragrances that have a strong leather accord in them that are perfectly appropriate for ladies to wear. And this is regardless of gender. Ladies, women tend to have very different skin chemistry than men. Things smell differently on us, and even one lady to the next, it smells very different. But fragrances as a whole definitely smell differently on women than they do on male skin, period. So rather than talk about my entire leather fragrance collection, because between my husband and myself, we have a lot. He has some amazing leather fragrances on his shelf that definitely lean on the masculine side. So I'm not going to be touching on those today. Although, if you like fragrances that have a masculine lean, and you like leather, let me know in the comments. I would be happy to do a separate video of my most masculine leather fragrances between myself and my husband. I have some on my shelf down in the bottom corner over there, and he has some on his, and I can pull them out and give you like a top 10 of those also. Really some fabulous gems of leather fragrances that people miss out on because they're scared of leather. So I made this video more about fragrances that have leather, that are very wearable by women. And for this video, I have ranked them from like the most wearable leather to maybe a leather that's a little bit edgy for a lady to wear, especially those ladies that prefer fragrances that are in the feminine category. So there are 10 that I'll share here that I think are wearable by ladies, and would be happy to do that other more masculine or aggressive leaning set of leather fragrances in another video. If you're interested, please let me know in the comments. So in slot number 1 and slot number 2 in this order is Rogue by Rihanna, and then also Bottega Veneta by Bottega Veneta. So these are really similar. If you want a more limited collection, you don't need both of these. I would go with one or the other. And if you wanted something a little bit more feminine leaning, I would go with Rogue first and go with this one if you want something that's slightly edgier. But these are super similar in the air. Both of these have a really soft, suede kind of leather note. And the main difference, they both have patchouli. This one has been compared heavily to Christian Dior Gris Dior, which is a rose and patchouli fragrance. And this one has been compared to this one. The main difference is this has a fruit note that I think is pretty prominent in the opening. I would say less so in the mid and the dry down of the fragrance. In the dry down, these smell pretty similar. This one has a nice plum note that actually just translates into a general berry note. If I didn't know it was a plum note, I would tell you that it was a raspberry note at the top of this. Very soft, very subtle, almost like a milky raspberry. I find these perfectly office appropriate, really nice for wearing suits to meetings and those kinds of things where you want to feel put together, you want to feel classy, but have a little bit more, maybe a tiny bit more edge than a traditional floral or fruity fragrance might get you, especially if you're in a boardroom and trying to hold your own among other powerhouses in the room. Something like this, one of these might set you apart. So one as the most feminine leather in my collection, and this as number 2. Let me pause because I should have said at the top of the video, when I do these videos where the focus is one note or one accord, for me to pull fragrances to go into those videos, it has to be a top note or top accord in the fragrance. It can't be like buried down or be an accompanying player. It's got to be like the main actor, the headline actor in the fragrance. So in case you're wondering, well, why isn't such and such fragrance in the video? 1, I might not have it in my collection. 2, maybe I don't care for it enough to have it in the video. Or 3, it's in the composition, but it's really not a major player, and therefore, in my opinion, can be saved for a different video and wouldn't take up a spot in a video like this. So for these, leather is a very prominent accord in both of these. In third place, but maybe it could have been in second or first place in terms of it leaning on the feminine side, is from Nobile 1942. Someone told me how to pronounce this, and I have since forgotten. So I'm going to give it my best attempt. Il Giardino, Delle, Delizie. Okay, that's what we're going to go with. This I find to be a really soft leather because it has some beautiful florals and some green notes and this almond milkiness to it. I find this to be a lighter, thinner fragrance than maybe some of the other. I don't like that the top just kind of comes off like that. That really bothers me, but that's not what we're here for. I find that this is a softer leaning fragrance. The consistency, if you will, of the smell is thinner, maybe than all of my other leather fragrances. And maybe for that reason, it should have been in slot number one as being my most wearable feminine fragrance. But it has tuberose and jasmine and some other florals in there that give it this really soft feminine edge, although it is definitely, in my opinion, a leather dominant fragrance. It has a little bit of woodiness too, which rounds this out, and it wears very lightly on the skin. This is not a powerhouse of a fragrance that's going to knock people out, move people out of the way. You're not going to move any mountains with this, but you might turn a head or two because of its softness and that unusual leather note in here alongside the other more feminine leaning notes. So in fourth place, I go to a fragrance that I know some female YouTube fragrance reviewers have really fallen in love with. Although I think this is marketed mostly toward men, if I'm not mistaken. It's from Lattafa and it's called Qaa'ed. It's also one of the more affordable fragrances in my collection that doesn't look cheap. The bottle is plastic, but it looks more opulent than maybe the materials would have you think. And it holds really well in the hands and comes in some nice packaging too. I got this for, it was either 30-ish or right under that. For some reason, I want to say it was in the mid-20s. Anyway, this is a fragrance that starts to lean more into deeper leather territory. Beautiful leather, some spices, there's vanilla. The vanilla gives this a nice feminine softness to it, even though it's easily wearable by men also. But I do think this has a sweetness and a softness to it that makes it really lovely for ladies to wear. There's some spices in here like cinnamon and cardamom. And there's also a very soft oud note. Don't be scared. Oud, I have some oody fragrances, okay, that are really in your face and loud, proud ouds. This is a very soft, almost like a baby oud for those of you that are either not familiar with the note or just not into a really heavy oud fragrance. It's a supporting player in here. In my opinion, this is a leather fragrance with a beautiful vanilla and some spices and some oud sort of lingering off to the side of the party, if you will, and fairly long lasting and fairly projecting. Really nice fragrance. Next, I'm going to a fragrance that made it into my top 10 for life, 2 years in a row, and this is Saffron Lazuli from the Carolina Herrera Confidentials line. I love this line of fragrances. My favorite is the Maison Lancôme line, followed by this one. The bottles are just gorgeous. This is definitely a leather fragrance. However, it's a very smooth, buttery leather. I tell the story of my mom when I was little wearing a leather coat. It smells like she smelled in her leather coat when she came in out of the cold, and in her pocket, she would always have a piece of juicy fruit bubble gum. If you remember what that smelled like, that sort of banana-y smell combined with like a spearmint piece of gum together. Like if you had those two, the powder of those two gums, plus the butteriness of the leather coat mixed with just a splash of whatever perfume, 80s bombastic perfume she was wearing, that's kind of the vibe that I get from this fragrance. I don't find this to be a harsh leather fragrance at all. It is a strong fragrance, okay, so know that it is projecting and long-lasting. However, it's, in my opinion, a decently unisex fragrance, maybe has some masculine hints in it, if you will, but it's definitely not what you would think of as a traditional leather fragrance like Tom Ford's ombre leather, for example. This is a unique, interesting composition. One viewer recently said that this reminds them of Side Effect from Initio, and I think that's right. I think there's some similarities there. They're not identical, but I can see how she would get that vibe from this. So if you like Side Effect from Initio and you're looking for something similar, maybe give something like this a try. It is a difficult fragrance to track down. However, you can still find it on gray market sites like your Fragrance Net and sites like that. It'll come in and out of stock. So you can do just a regular Google search and go to the shopping tab and see where this shows up and check out what the best price is. Saffron Lazuli, one of my all-time favorites at this point. In the number 6 slot is White Suede from Tom Ford. This is an eau de parfum concentration. If you like clean, almost cold-smelling, musky scents, this is obviously a suede kind of a leather, so it has this almost fuzziness to it, if you will, fuzzy texture. But if you like a musky, suede kind of fragrance, White Suede might be an interesting one to try out. I do have a warning for this. It depends on the weather and it depends on the person's skin chemistry. I've heard people say that it can smell like smoke lingering on a smoker's clothing, like cigarette smoke. I don't get a lot of that out of here. I guess if I, sniff hard enough, I can get a general hint of that. What this reminds me more of, I'll tell you a story here. Let me tell you a little story. Come in close. When I was little, I literally had a pair of blue suede boots. I actually had blue suede shoes too, like Elvis Presley. My blue suede shoes were from Buster Brown. Who remembers that shoe store? I don't think it exists anymore, but we would go get our feet sized down on Fordham Road in the Bronx. If you know, you know. Does anyone know out there? Hit me up in the comments if you know what I'm talking about. And I remember getting my first pair of blue suede shoes, and it had almost like a dark chocolate maroon base to it, like a rubber sole to it. And it had, I kid you not, it had like these dark red laces. I wore the mess out of those shoes. I wore them everywhere. I even wore them with dresses, and they were like Oxford shoes. And then later on in my late elementary school years into early middle school, I had a pair of blue suede boots. And it was about the color of this sweater, come and think about it. I loved both of those. I loved the Buster Brown shoes. I loved the boots. And I would brush them with a suede brush, and there was a spray that you had to put on them to keep them clean. This smelled like the shoes smelled after I put the suede cleaner on them. I'll share that there's a little bit of sandalwood in here in the faint distance, but by and large, this is that like a white suede. Oh, it's called white suede. See what I did there? White. Anyway, white suede kind of smell, except it's blue suede from my childhood memory, alongside muskiness and a cold set of notes. There's lily of the valley, but to me, this comes across almost like it has an iris or a violet note in it. And I wouldn't say that this is a crowd pleaser, but I would say it's a very interesting and unique smell if you like suede and musk together. In seventh place is a fragrance that I really adore. It made it into, if I'm not mistaken, my top 10 the first year that I did the top 10 in 2020. So this is Tiziana Terenzi Spirito Fiorentino. And the reason it's sitting this high up on the list, because a lot of people tend to think of this as a BR 540 cousin, Baccarat Rouge 540 cousin. And I think that that's true. There's a lot of that kind of DNA in here. It has the airiness of that. It definitely has a strong saffron note. It even has like this woody sugariness to it. The difference here is that this has, I think, a pretty prominent leather animalic note to it. It has like a factor to it. I enjoy wearing this. It is a beast of a fragrance. My husband doesn't care for this very much. I love it. I think it's amazing. This is a neat one. It is long lasting. It is projecting. It would perform super well in cold, crisp weather, like the cold crisp of a winter night. Ooh, this is nice. It's a very much like we talk about boss lady fragrances, definitely a boss lady kind of a scent. You know, when you enter the room in this, people know who you are and that you mean business. This is a don't mess with me kind of a fragrance. At the same time, though, it has some softness and femininity to it that made it appropriate for this video. So I would not hesitate to tell any woman who wanted a bit of a daring leather fragrance with a feminine edge to try this gorgeous one, Spirito Fiorentino. This is a beauty. Okay, and this next fragrance maybe is not the most leathery of the bunch, but it has a strong leather in it that I think brings it into 8th place here. So we're talking about Oud Aswad from Swiss Arabian, like Shaghaf Oud, the same sort of line of fragrances. This one is in the black bottle, and the main difference is this one has a very prominent rose note. It's a beautiful, like nighttime gothy dark rose I find that's in here, along with oud and leather and saffron. It's a very strong, powerful fragrance. It really does fill a space. When this first came in the mail, I sprayed it on my husband's arm, and he walked across the kitchen, and the entire kitchen smelled of it. Yeah, this is a strong one. I have worn this only, I would say, 2 or 3 times since I've purchased it, and that was maybe a couple of years ago. And my husband has worn it once or twice also, because it is a really strong fragrance, like Oud Bouquet, like in that territory of strong. And so I really need to be in the mood for that powerful rose fragrance, because the rose part of it can be pretty dominant alongside the oud and the leather and the saffron. I would say all of those notes are pretty important in this composition. And depending on the skin, it can be leathery. Like this is super leathery on me. On my husband, the oud is more pronounced. This is a bold one, Oud Aswad, if you're in the mood for it. The next two fragrances could probably be tied for 9th and 10th place, but for the sake of order, I'm going to list Platinum Leather, again from Carolina Herrera, in 9th place. What a gorgeous bottle. Can we just give it up for how pretty that is? But anyway, again, like white suede, if you're into a musky leather, this is a really beautiful one. It's leaning more into the deep unisex, into slightly masculine, maybe more masculine territory, but still, I think, wearable by ladies. This is a very musky leather. The leather part of it is clean and linear, like fresh new leather that you would find in a high-end car. It reminds me a lot of that. And there's some earthy aspects to it, like a patchouli note. There's a cypriol oil. So it has like almost like this gritty earthiness in the distance here. If I didn't know any better, I would think this also had an iris kind of note in it. There's something sort of cold and linear while still having some earthy undertones at the same time. A rather unique leather, in my opinion, and very highly wearable by ladies, particularly in colder months. I find this to be a beautiful and unique leather. So I'm going to round out this video with one of my favorite leather fragrances. Every time I think I don't want this fragrance anymore, I smell it and go, ooh, this is staying in the collection. It is so, so good. It's from Jo Malone, and it's Bronze, Wood, and Leather. This is one that I've only ever heard guys on YouTube talking about, not ladies, and I don't understand why. Or maybe I understand, because it does lean a little bit masculine. So Rogue was my scent of the day, which I have on, but I also just sprayed this, and I just find this to be, if you like boyfriend fragrances, and I'm talking about, have you smelled Stash from Sarah Jessica Parker? A fragrance like that, that maybe isn't considered a feminine fragrance, but there's something so comforting about it that you want to wear it as a lady. This is like that to me. This is one of the only fragrances that has a vetiver note that I can really tolerate in here. The vetiver is smooth and earthy. There is a smokiness. There's a juniper note, and the juniper is smooth and flattened out, whereas in some other fragrances, juniper can be a sharper, more pronounced note. So all of that combined with this really buttery, smooth leather makes this like a hug in a bottle with a slight, it's like you're wearing your boyfriend's sweatshirt, that kind of comfort to it. I just find this to be very alluring, very sexy. I enjoy wearing it. I really enjoy when my husband wears it. It performs really well on both of our skin. Yeah, this is just a beauty of a fragrance. Bronze, Wood, and Leather. I'm going to round out my 10 suggestions for ladies who are scared of leather and you really want to try out an actual leather fragrance, not just a perfume that has a leather note buried somewhere deep in it. These are leathery. The ones that I've talked about. Let me know if you're interested in any of these, and if so, which stands out to you. If you have a favorite leather fragrance that you would like to recommend, drop it in the comments. I know that you all read each other's comments and get ideas from each other, so feel free to chat away in the comments. And do please let me know if you'd like to see a video that has more masculine leaning leathers, either for yourself because you have a daring taste in fragrances, or for the man in your life if you want to pick up something sexy and sultry and leathery leather for the guy in your life. Let me know. I've got many suggestions for you. Thanks so much for hanging out with me, and take care, friends.